Since the Democratic Republic of Congo has been plagued with conflict, the ongoing crisis in the DRC in recent times has escalated, calling for attention from the international community. In the major developments, the Congolese government, also known as the Kinshasa government, has agreed to direct peace talks with the M23 rebels set to begin on March 18, 2025 in Luanda, Angola. Could this be a breakthrough moment for a region plagued by violence, displacement, or deep-rooted tensions? With Rwanda leading the mediation, especially with Joao Lorenzo as the AU chair this year 2025, and regional leaders scrambling to assess the security situation, we have many questions that looms in the air arising. And is Kinshasa finally embracing dialogue as a viable solution, or is this another attempt at peace destined to unravel in that part of the African continent? We equally ask ourselves the question, what role do external players, including Rwanda and the Southern African Development Community SADC, have to play in shaping the outcome of the said talks? Most importantly, can the people of Eastern DRC finally hope for path to lasting peace? Today, we dissect the stakes, the challenges, the possibilities with our expert. Today, stay with us. This is Talking Point on 4U Media Africa. For over a decade, the heart of the African continent, mostly known as the Democratic Republic of Congo, has been dealing with conflict, and recently has been clashes with the M23 rebel group in that part of the African continent, at which numerous calls from the international community as well as regional parties or institutions for cessation of hostilities in that part of the African continent come March 18th, 2025 in Angola, Luanda to be precise. The main leaders or stakeholders, that is the Kinshasa government and the M23, will sit on the dialogue table to see how they can resolve this pending crisis. And of course, to dissect this information this day, I'm being joined by Dr. Stanley FONGOD, who is joining us in his capacity as a Pan-Africanist, an economist as well. Thank you, immensely, sir, for honoring today's invitation.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for having me, and thank their viewers and those who will subsequently be watching this broadcast as well.
And we should reiterate that you're watching us on 4U television. Meanwhile, we are meeting equally on 4U radio from 96.3, and of course, and streaming on our respective social media platforms. Now, to dive deep into today's conversation, with the crisis plaguing the Democratic Republic of Congo, in your own perspective, what are the key factors that have fueled this ongoing conflict up to this day, when we are finally seeing, a dialogue between the M23 and the Kinshasa government after numerous calls for, a cessation of hostilities to be restored, or for peace to return to the conflict-hit country?
I think that if you're going to ask anyone, especially those who are pundits and people who basically are trying to, to unravel whatever has been happening in the DRC, what the M23, rebel group is, they'll tell you it's a rebel group operating in the eastern part of the DRC. Exactly. They'll tell you about its origin. It's been linked to, the Second Congo War. They'll tell you a lot of issues about them being a Tutsi-led group. But nobody will absolutely go to tell you exactly why the M23 in the first place. I think that is important for us to understand origin. It's important for us to understand that the M23 in itself basically was a splinter group that came out of the CNDP, which was the National Congress for the Defense of the People. And this was as a result of the fact that the Tutsis in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, Tutsis who are actually Congolese for that matter, all right, and they are also in Uganda, they are also in Rwanda. As a matter of fact, the president of Rwanda himself is a Tutsi. And so when you have a broad group of people who basically has been marginalized in their own country, which is basically the DRC, then that basically led to what the M23 is all about. And obviously, the M23 is as a result of a March 23, the M stands for March, the March 23 agreement, which took place in 2009, which was absolutely disrespected, by the Congolese government, and that basically fought up this group, and so they got the name the M23, and it's as a result of that. So it's welcome news that the same government who basically said they would have nothing to do with the M23 is now calling for the M23 to sit down and have a dialogue. I've always thought that on the African continent and anywhere in the world, dialogue is absolutely the way forward. We cannot use the barrel of a gun to settle any dispute, because the time comes when the oppression of the people is so much that the sound of an AK-47 will not be able to quench their thirst for freedom. And if that was going to be the case, there is nobody who wins, and everyone is a loser. So therefore, for the salvation of the country, for there to be some real level of progress made in the DRC, I think that it is just welcome news that the government is willing to sit down with the rebel group and actually have real conversations, and conversations that should have taken place since March 23 of 2009.
Exactly, and of course we should note that these latest developments comes against the backdrop of the taking out or capturing of key cities in South as well as North Kivu provinces in recent times. Since the start of this year 2025, we noted Goma, we noted Bukavu, and we noted other key cities that of course were supposed to have been protected by the Kinshasa government. But away from that, I remember some time ago in the course of this program, we had brought forth asking the question if there was a possibility of this dialogue between these two parties, especially after the capture of Goma and Bukavu. But at this point, we're seeing Angola that's trying to mediate the conflict. And of course, in your previous response, you highlighted that there are numerous countries in the region, notably Uganda, notably Rwanda, that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, so that leads me to my next question. What is, or how significant is the role of this, key regional players as far as this conflict is concerned?
I don't even think we should even be talking about the role of key regional players in trying to be able to solve the issues that is taking place in this part of the country. In 2009, when the talks failed, no one said anything. The key regional players said nothing, and everyone basically thought that these guys have gone into oblivion, that is basically gone into extinction, and that there was not a group for anyone to bother themselves about. But then they regroup. All right, it was in 2012 and 2013 that they gained international recognition when they captured Goma. That was the first rebellion, that arose as a result of the M23. Once Goma was captured in November, in later part of November in 2012, that's when everyone basically said, "Hey, wait a minute, something is going on here." And the reason for that is because Goma is a huge mining city. It's a huge mining region, and so almost all of the minerals that the DRC is known for, somehow it's kind of clustered around Goma. So Goma is like a mining depot. And as a result of that, you have all of these international players on the ground, folks who basically are helping to make sure that the country knows no peace, so that they can continue to carry out the illegal mining that is taking place in the Congo. And that's the reason why you have to be able to look at the EU and ask yourself what the hell is going on. You have to be able to look at the UN and ask yourself, really, is this all you can do? Is this the best you can do in relationship to maintaining peace? But obviously, when you have companies like Apple, you have companies like Samsung, okay, whose violation is bigger than anything the UN can ever dream of, or anything the EU can ever dream of, then obviously the notion of peace in this part of the world becomes something that is quite distant to the memory of anyone else. So we have to be able to find ways in which, not just that we're dealing, trying to be able to find a real common ground rounds in this area, but to also instill in the minds of those who are responsible to kind of curbing the peace, or bringing the peace and curbing the violence rather, and bringing the peace to this region, to understand fully that if you are not Afrocentric, there's just no way in which you can be talking about bringing peace in the DRC, because subconsciously you are kowtowing to whichever foreign entity that there is. And this is testament to the fact that while we are talking about the M23 rebel group, let us not forget that there are 125 to 127, 28 different rebel groups operating in the same region in Congo.
Well, we're moving forward. Just to pick up from where you stopped, I remember some time ago the representative of Kinshasa to the United Nations had called on the global institution to call on the parties that be to be able to resolve this crisis. But as it stands, a few days ago, notably, we saw the United Nations Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region, who made a visit or a tour to the Great Lakes region. He stopped in the Democratic Republic of Congo, he went to Uganda, he went to Burundi, and amongst these, at the center of discussions was security and the restoration of peace. Could we tie this visit, this recent visit that comes less than a week, to what is happening on these latest developments, where we are getting to a point of a dialogue between the M23 and the government of President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi?
I think that it is a little bit quite of a demented mindset that they have. You can go to DRC all you want. You can go to Uganda all you want. You need to be able to step foot, in Rwanda and have real conversations in Rwanda, because the only person, in my opinion, and I think that this might be just factual as a result of the billions of allegations that has been placed against Rwanda, which most of it is basically useless, is the idea that we can be able to sideline Rwanda in our talks for peace so far as the DRC is concerned. In the mind of the Tutsi, their maker is Rwanda. And the reason for that is because that is the only group, or that is the only country that they believe sincerely will have their best interests at heart. And it is understandably so. Because if you look at the president of Rwanda, who is a Tutsi himself, he was once upon a time, just considered to be a rebel roaming in Uganda, and also in some parts of Congo. So if you basically have looked at the Rwanda conflict or the Rwanda genocide, that was the premise for it. So we need to be able to have talks with people that really do matter. If you want to speak to M23, if you really want to be able to have deep dialogue with M23, and a dialogue that is meaningful, long-lasting, a kind of dialogue that reaches their soul, you need to be talking to the maker. You need to be talking to, somewhat their Israel, their Jerusalem, in relation to the whichever religious affiliation that you're with. And the reason for that is because they will consider Paul Kagame to be someone that they listen to be someone of a mentor, someone that can actually speak to them. But the notion that you show up and you're trying to sideline, Rwanda, meanwhile Rwanda has been calling for dialogue for years. This has been more than a decade where Rwanda has been calling for dialogue, has been basically saying this is what you need to do. M23 military rebels were basically locked up in the camp, which really was not even a locked up camp, in Rwanda. And the Rwanda president kept telling the government of the DRC that you need to have dialogue with these people, because these people whom you've kept in these camps, it is not really a camp. A day will come when they will return. And lo and behold, a day came and they did. So the reality is this, that the only one person who you should be talking to in this region are not folks who are interested in just mining, are folks who are interested because they are the same people. And the only person who stands in that vantage point will be the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame.
Okay, I'll be picking up from where you stopped, but I'll be coming back to develop your recent points. Let's recall that Angola on numerous occasions had tried to broker a ceasefire between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo on numerous occasions after several ministerial meetings that took place between leaders of the two countries. But at the end of the day, they came to one conclusion, with Rwandan officials stating notably that the conflict was a DRC problem and not a Rwanda problem. at this point in time, we're seeing just a few days ago, the Congolese or the Kinshasa government had stated that anybody that gave the location of the leader of the M23 was going to get a sum of money. Now with these latest developments, don't it seem a little bit controversial? How do you analyze this, this unfolding of events?
Well, the reality is this, that just like I said, it doesn't matter exactly who comes to the table as a key player. South Africa basically was throwing their weight on the ground, and unfortunately that weight was as useless as anything else. And the reason is because you need to start asking yourself, what South Africa doing in the DRC, if not for the fact that they have mining interest? What is Angola doing in the DRC? They have mining interest. Uganda have mining interest, and of course and obviously the Rwanda as well, and Uganda for that matter, they both have mining interest in the Goma area. That's just the way it is. Either they're coming in with proxies or their companies to do work in there, but that's just the way it is. Everyone is mining in Congo, all right? Everybody is on the ground in Congo mining. The United States is there. Everybody is in Congo, period, all right? The West, the East, Africa, everybody is in the DRC. It's a free-for-all campaign for mines, for minerals taking place in the DRC. My point is this: if you look at the consistency as to what is it that Rwanda has been saying, they have consistently denied any form or all the allegations that has been levied that they are somewhat connected to the M23, and that makes a lot of sense. And the reason for that is because Rwanda has had a series of campaigns in Congo, and it was as a result of Paul Kagame pursuing, all right, the Hutus rebels who basically carry out gross atrocity, all right, in Rwanda during the Rwanda genocide, and fled into the DRC, and they ran into South Africa, and they have been, into all of those southern regions, and that was the reason for which it is that everyone will point accusing fingers, to Rwanda to say, hey, you know what, you're responsible for this, because obviously the people who basically will help them also in the DRC will be Tutsis. They're the same people, all right? And so my point here is, irrespective of whichever way you go with this, and irrespective of whether we're basically trying to figure out, what it's happening in relationship to the UN, what's happening in relationship to Angola, and what's happening, whether we're trying to be able to use secondary means apart from dialogue to be able to put an end to the conflict, the truth is this: at the superficial level, there is this whole entire stuff of trying to be able to bring peace. That's true, and I think that there's a lot of pressure on DRC to be able to put an end to this violence. But let us not forget, a peaceful Democratic Republic of Congo is not good for global business. Let me say that again. A peaceful Democratic Republic of Congo is not good for global business. A peaceful Democratic Republic of Congo simply means that the prices of cell phone, the prices of EVs, electric vehicles, the prices of electronics machinery that uses electronic components, okay, of cobalt and, which is infused with lithium, all of that will basically skyrocketed. So to be able to have a peaceful DRC means that there is going to be a significant shift, all right, not just in our geopolitical outlook of the world, but on the economic front, there will be a significant shift. And I will tell you categorically speaking that the forces that be behind the scene will do whatever it takes to make sure that there is no peace whatsoever in the DRC. The pain we face on the African continent is the EU. The sickness that is ravaging the African continent is the EU. The cancer that is basically eating up Africa is the EU. If we cannot address the issues of the EU, everything we do is a band-aid, not just on a superficial wound, it's a band-aid on the wound that is getting rotten daily, all right? And we have maggots coming out on the wound, and what we're putting on the wound is bandage. We need a little bit more. And I came to submit to somebody that it has come to a point where we need to basically have something amputated. And if there's going to be any form of amputation, that amputation will have to be one unique organization, and that is the EU. The EU is dead, all right? It's dead. And to have the AU still running things on the African continent simply means we are not serious about the future of the continent. For us to be serious about Africa's future, we must be able to have institutions that are serious about the issues that pertain to the African, not these boys club we have in Addis Ababa that is as useless as it was when it was the OAU.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. FONGOD. So what we are getting from what you have stated, right, though there have been calls for reforms, what we are getting is the conflict, the crisis that is ongoing in the Democratic Republic of Congo is more tied to, the shifting geopolitical tendencies at this point in time, right?
Right, obviously. And the reality is this, whether you like it or not, you cannot talk about Congo. The reason why there is conflict in Congo is because of its minerals. Without the minerals, we will have absolutely no conflict. Congo is not just the only country south of the Sahara or in the sub-Saharan region, that is in the sub-Saharan region. So why Congo? Okay, what primarily it's the reason with the issues we are facing in the Congo. By the time we finish with the M23, we still have 125 different militia groups that are in operation in this particular region. There's really no functioning government, so far as I know it, in this part of the world. What is going on? What is happening? There are UN trucks, all right, that are supposed to be peacekeeping, all right, but they're vehicles that are used to transport minerals. So if you're going to tell me that the United Nations is in the DRC in the name of peacekeeping, and every soldier who is wearing a UN military uniform is out there also mining, obviously everybody is mining. I can honestly tell you, everyone is mining. Russia is mining, China is mining, America is mining, the West is mining, the Eastern Bloc is mining, Africans are mining, everybody is mining. It's a free-for-all at the expense of those who are there. The Congolese are dying. Aggressive mining in the DRC area has created a scenario where you have hard water, hard minerals being, basically allowed to flow freely in streams. This has led to a lot of deformities in newborn babies with cleft palate, all right, an untold amount of people dying from cancer-related issues as a result of the aggressive mining that is taking place in the DRC. While the world is consciously, especially America, flaunting this idea with the Biden administration of going green, the new Green Deal, the African is dying. The African is the only one who is not benefiting from anything pertaining to going green. While we are protecting the environment in America, the environment in Africa is basically being decimated. And this goes for third world nations that are blessed, and cursed at the same time with mineral resources. This is the pain the African is going through, and this is the pain in the DRC. So when you look at the DRC, you're looking at a melting pot of total chaos as a result of her wealth. And this has gone on for for hundreds of years, almost a century, almost, what am I talking, almost 10, I think if you're talking about almost 1,000 years, actually, maybe probably about almost 1,000 years, that the DRC has been heavily mined the way it's been mined. And that is primarily as a result of the fact that she's that blessed. But then she is losing. Right, she is losing, and the other people who are supposed to be there to be able to make sure that we curb this issue is the AU and whoever on the African continent has any form of common sense. And that's why if you look at a country like Nigeria, which is supposed to be the elder brother on the continent, who basically can keep our own electricity running, all right, as dysfunctional as she is, which is an eyesore on the African continent, well, the DRC is in deep trouble.
Indeed, and that's the reality on the ground. But hopefully with talks like this, we can be able to bring about solutions to the table. Of course, we're wondering what prompted at these recent talks between the two stakeholders. Meanwhile, recently, that was yesterday, we saw the leaders of the Southern African Development Community SADC that held a virtual meeting under the leadership of the Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa. But then, with all these latest developments, they discussed numerous things, notably security, and it was important the pledge to keep strengthening security within the region, upholding human rights, especially amongst the communities that have been affected, notably in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But let's look at the in-depth picture. Now, they agreed to withdraw their troops from the Democratic Republic, especially in the eastern part of the country. We have had other troops that have signaled their withdrawal from that same region. Would this same withdrawal leaving the DRC to itself, because at some point there have been numerous forces on the ground? With this troop withdrawal coming out the way from or out of the eastern DRC, is these or could these moves foster or further foster, the path to peace within that region? Though we reiterate that it might be linked, the ongoing conflict might be linked to, more geopolitical dynamics.
Well, I don't think that it really will do much. First of all, the East African community has also had forces there, which includes Rwanda, okay, and the DRC as part of what will be the deployed, regional force in that part of that part of Congo. All right, but if you look at what is going on, the M23 continues, to basically make significant progress. They are fighting, they are gaining grounds. If you look at what the Western Bloc has come up with, and this includes the United States, this includes the EU, all right, they have called for there to be to cease all forms of support for M23. Now, this makes no sense, and the reason for that is because whether you're supporting or not supporting, the M23 fighters are not fighting, okay, for minerals. They are not fighting because they are trying to mine. They are not fighting because they are trying to go to gain recognition. They are fighting for the survival. All right, and when anyone fights for their own survival, there is no mountain they will not climb, there is no valley that they will not cross. The tendency that they will somewhat buckle under pressure, right, that is laughable. We need to be able to have bilateral talks, okay, between DRC and Rwanda. Those talks must take place. As a matter of fact, I don't know exactly why these talks haven't taken place till now. There has to be talks between Rwanda and the DRC. The only reason why I say so is because we are talking with Tutsis, all right? And obviously, the president of Rwanda is a Tutsi himself who has come under great oppression, all right, that came place as a result of the Hutus in Rwanda, where over 1 million, all right, on the other extremists talks about 800,000, but 1 million, Tutsis died, okay, were basically hacked to death with machetes in 100 days. In 100 days, 1 million, Tutsis got hacked to death, by Hutus in Rwanda. This is very fresh in the mind of any Tutsi, and it's very fresh in the minds of the president of Rwanda also. So we need to be able to make sure that DRC is talking. If there was going to be any conversation, okay, between nations, I think that the people who should be sitting on the table having this conversation, okay, is Rwanda and the DRC. That is the conversation. That is the bloc, not America, not Europe, not South Africa, not Angola, nobody, not even Uganda. We need to be able to make sure that Rwanda is speaking to the DRC folks. They need to be real conversations on the ground. And I think that if you're going to basically have, someone like Lourenço, the president of Angola, trying to be able to find any kind of a lasting talk, therefore let that lasting talk be between a real conversation between DRC and Rwanda.
But we know that in the past, the previous talks that were held between the DRC and Rwanda have actually failed. But with these set talks that are about to take place on March 18th, could we say that they are somewhat different from the previous? Is it better to have talks since those Because the reason why the talks actually failed was because no official of M23 was ready or was on the dialogue table. The Rwandan government had insisted that the three parties come to a dialogue table and actually negotiate. Without that, do you believe that we are headed nowhere? Because at this point, could we really term this new talks as somewhat different? And if yes, why is that so? Because every other talk, that happened between Rwanda and the DRC, excluding the M23, was as demented as it gets. I don't understand exactly, where we come with this idea that we can be able to have conversations about the people who are fighting for their own survival, and we have those conversations without having them present. The reason why they're called M23, for that matter, is because the DRC, all right, basically treated them the way they did on March 23rd, 2009, and that is the reason why they're called M23. To now have a conversations with Rwanda, trying to be able to mediate what is happening between the M23 rebels and the DRC without having the DRC makes no sense. Rwanda is not Congo. Rwanda is only mediating because the people in Congo who are Congolese, okay, Tutsis who are Congolese, the only reason why Rwanda is over there mediating is because Rwanda is obviously sympathizing with the fact that these are Tutsis in Rwanda who are Congolese for that matter. So if there was anybody who should be present in that table, the two important parties to be present in that table is not Rwanda. It is M23 and the president and the coalition from the government of the DRC. That's it. Rwanda will basically just be playing an elderly brotherly role on the side, trying to make sure that the talks are smooth and that conversations are meaningful and that they can be real positive gains that are made as a result of trying to be able to curb this violence and to curb the the offenses that is taking place constantly. But if you think for a second that you'll be having conversations with the DRC, you'll be having conversations with Rwanda, and then basically treating M23, are Congolese for that matter, as if to say they are non-existent, and that is the reason for the talk. M23 is not being controlled by Rwanda. M23 are Congolese in Congo, fighting for the liberation of their people that have constantly been oppressed and marginalized by Congolese in Congo, not in Rwanda. So the conversation should be between M23 and the DRC, with Rwanda in the supervising, okay, whatever conversations and dialogue is taking place. That's a very much different aspect to it. But given the history of the broken agreements that we have seen, what, in your perspective, what guarantees could be put during the dialogue to put or to ensure that both sides adhere to the potential deals that are going to be brokered when the said deals actually eventually, or the peace talks eventually happen in Rwanda? In your perspective, the future looks bright on this, because now we have M23 rebel groups, this rebel group M23, now sitting down with the DRC, and hopefully what happened in 2009, March 23rd of 2009, will not repeat itself. In that way, we can have real meaningful progress. Now, this is exactly what it ought to be all along. And should we have some international when I say international, I'm not basically meaning I'm not meaning the West nor the East. I'm actually talking about Africans. Yes. Should we have Rwanda on the table? Yes, absolutely. Should we have Angola on the table? Yes, they can come. All right. And any other person else who wants to, but maybe we put South Africa to the side. As a matter of fact, put South Africa away, hundreds of miles away from from these talks. Let us have Rwanda. Let us have Angola, M23 and DRC. DRC and Angola will be having a conversation, and let Rwanda and Angola mediate within those conversations. I think that that's the template going forward. With that,
just by virtue of the fact that the DRC is having conversations with M23, I think that on that premise alone, the future looks really bright.
Now, let's look at it from a different perspective. In recent times, since this conflict re-emerged, years back, up to date, it has led to, several humanitarian costs, a very high humanitarian cost, not just within the DRC, especially within the eastern part of the country, but it has led to the displacement of numerous persons across the Great Lakes region and even the East African part of the African continent. Now, with this said, how, say, this peace talks actually happen and a deal is brokered between the two parties or the three parties that come to the negotiation table, how would they be able, moving forward, address this humanitarian crisis that have been brought as a result of this conflict that has plagued so much the Eastern DRC?
So we are talking about the DRC with a series of issues. Now, once we've finished with the M23 rebels and there is real stability, then we go back to where we were before. It's like imagine you having a patient in the hospital that is suffering from some grave illness, and then suddenly there's something that develops and they were trying to stabilize them, but they're still in the hospital, right? And they're still very sick. So that is the DRC. There are 120 something different militia groups in the DRC that are constantly fighting. They are constantly battling one another for territory, and all of this because they control a series of mines being sponsored primarily from the West and the East. That's the way it is. That's the mode of operation in the DRC. There are planes flying into DRC, landing in the DRC, carrying out minerals out of the DRC on a daily basis, all right? So they are draining the country as much as they can and as fast as they could. That is what is taking place. Unfortunately, once we solve the issues of the M23, which basically is people who are of Congolese origin, who are Congolese, who are Tutsis in the DRC, who are basically suffering and are calling for some levels of equality and integration into the Congolese society, especially the government as a whole. Once we've solved that particular issue, once M23 sits down and talk with the DRC and then concessions are made and that one is over, we now have to turn our eyes to the 125 different militias groups, 126, 127, 128 different militia groups that are operating in the DRC. That is a bigger fight. And the reason for that is because most of these militia groups are actually funded, all right, by different corporations that are basically big business for different governments. Apple, Samsung, you're talking about any of these companies that are operating in the West in the tech space, Tesla, and companies which also have been sued for what? For child labor recently, I think as of 2019, okay, have been sued for child labor practices in the DRC because they're benefiting from it. Obviously, they are running the show on the ground, but not as them, but as, different groups that is basically supplying them all that they need. That is the bigger problem. And so we finish with M23, and then we turn our eyes to the different 120 something different militia groups that are operating in the DRC. Again, the EU has not just failed. The EU is non-existent. That is how sick this is. Because before the M23 showed up, these rebel groups were roaming around, controlling, creating havoc, all right? There were AK-47s, everywhere in Goma. All right, bullets flying every now and then, and it's just the way things are so far as Goma is concerned. I have friends on the ground in Goma, all right, and people who basically escaped the genocide in Rwanda that are in Goma, who would tell me, categorically speaking, just how evil, the situation are on the ground in Goma. We need something else on the African continent. We do not need the EU. We need something else in its place. And the reality is, if we really need, if we are in search of some real meaningful change in the DRC, in this part of the world, And obviously, in any part of the world, in any part of Africa that is going through this level of chaos, we need something else to replace the EU. And I think if you see what's happening in the Sahel, and how the ES, the Alliance for the Sahelan States, have decided to be able to basically create their own confederation and to fight all the terrorist activities that has been roaming freely in the Sahara, in the Sahel. That is a testament to the fact that the EU is really a sham. So we need to be able to have something else that replaces it if the continent would have to heal from these multiple conflicts, and that we have so far as, regional stability is concerned.
Speaking of regional stability, I would like to take you down memory lane. Now, a while ago, if you talk to Congolese as far as this ongoing crisis is concerned, or the ongoing conflict, most of them share the opinion that Rwanda is supporting the M23 rebels. But Rwanda, on its part, over the past years, has been denying all these allegations, coming all the way either from Congolese or from the Congolese or Kinshasa government. Now, from a Pan-Africanist or Pan-African perspective, how do you perceive these peace efforts? Are they somewhat hopeful or better still skeptical, especially with this, mixed feelings that's in the air, either from the part of Congolese, I'm talking about the citizens in at this point, and the Rwandan government?
Well, while we are talking about the Rwandan government, which the Rwandan government has absolutely refused, any involvement whatsoever, so far as the M23 is concerned, everyone keeps pointing accusing finger at Rwanda. Why is nobody talking about Uganda? What has been the role of Uganda in M23? Obviously, that role has evolved over time. Uganda role in the M23, which is something that which is something else that is well documented. It's quite complex and obviously shifting, right? So during the 2012-2013, first rebellion by the M23, Uganda was accused of harboring, their leader, all right, the senior commander leader that fled to Uganda. He was in Uganda. Why is the conversations not about Uganda? Why is the conversations all about Rwanda? All right, I think his name was Sota Tani, who basically was the leader of the M23. Why is it that when he ran and fled to Uganda, there is no talk about Uganda basically supporting the M23? Why is it always about Rwanda? I think that we need to, basically stop these blame games and, these accusations so far as Rwanda is concerned. I think really that there has to be real conversations that, brings Rwanda more to the table to bring lasting peace, because I think that they are the only people who has the real capacity to be able to speak to M23, and maybe that's the reason why they have been accused left and right concerning the issues that is taking place so far as the M23 conflicts in Goma, and the Kiev is concerned. Let us really have bring the M23 leaders and bring Rwanda to the table to have real legitimate conversations. And I think that if we're going to have any kind of talks, I think Uganda also acted, as a mediator at some point within the Kampala peace talks, with M23. That basically didn't go anywhere. Uganda has played diplomatic rules, and also, there have been allegations, that they had certain elements of the Ugandan military that was involved with the M23. Yes, they have been all of these talks, but then we don't get to hear anything of that sort so far as Rwanda is concerned. The only thing is that Rwanda is basically providing logistics and is providing military assistance to M23, which so far as I'm concerned, that basically means nothing. I think that if there be anyone who has been documented to have real legitimate influence in the M23, it should be Uganda. But nobody's talking about Uganda. Our focus is on Rwanda, and that is troubling.
Now shifting now to regional solidarity, on numerous occasions it's been reiterated that divided house cannot stand, but of course unity can be very paramount on the African continent and elsewhere. Now, being a Pan-Africanist, when you assess this situation that's happening in the DRC, because it should be noted that the Democratic Republic of Congo is not the only country on the African continent that is still reeling from turmoil, especially at this point in time. We have other countries like Sudan, we have Libya, we have other countries on the African continent that are still hoping for peace, you know, to be restored in their respective nations. But with our focus today on the Democratic Republic of Congo, mostly in the eastern part of the African country, what role can regional solidarity, you know, play in supporting sustainable peace within the Great Lakes region?
I think that regional stability and regional support is all that really matters, and I think that that is the way in which we go forward, especially when we're trying to be able to have any kind of meaningful conversations in relationship to bringing peace on the African continent. It has to be region by region, and the reason for that is because obviously since the AU has failed and the AU is of absolutely no value, the AU has zero importance in anything, and since the AU is as useless as it is, maybe the regional blocs will be able to do something meaningful. By the way, the regional blocs are those who suffer the most once a country basically troubled. If you are going to look at Rwanda, when the Rwanda genocide actually happened, DRC was in trouble, Uganda was in trouble, everybody else was in trouble. And now that there is this counter-offensive taking place in the DRC, you have a lot of people running into Rwanda, running into Uganda, you know, just to escape the violence. Once there is violence in any country, neighboring countries do suffer, and we see this happening in the eastern part in the western part of the continent as well with the ECOWAS. We need to be able to make sure that we reinforce these regional blocs, let them become as powerful as it is, because those will be the guys who basically will have to maintain some form of stability on the continent of Africa while we replace, as a matter of fact, while we damage, destroy the EU and then build something else in its place, and which will fundamentally not look like the EU that we know. So once that is being done, I think that we should be, you know, it should be good for us, and it should be good for the continent, especially strong regional blocs. It's healthy for a good Africa and a healthy Africa, you know, geopolitically. Secondly, I think that it's a good thing for us to be able to make sure that we understand why these fightings are taking place in the first place. I can solve the problem of Rwanda, of the DRC today. I think I have the capacity to solve that problem today. I can put an end to the violence in the DRC. I have that capacity. I am good like that. So what I can do, and it will just basically mean for us to basically come up with one simple announcement that states that we've just discovered, all right, that there is no minerals left in the DRC. Once that announcement is made, the DRC will be as peaceful as Mecca. Once that announcement is made that there is no minerals left in the DRC, the DRC will be as peaceful as, you know, Mecca. You will not need to do anything else, all right? There will not be any need for dialogue. People will drop off their guns and they'll start talking to one another as brothers. But as long as DRC holds 30% of what the world is looking for, you know, to keep their EV machines running, the United Nations, the United States, the EU bloc, the Western bloc will basically sit on the sidelines and will be posting like, oh, we need to talk about peace. Oh, no, we need to do this peace. Oh, no, there has to be this stuff. Well, the reason why they're flaunting, as if to say they're well-intentioned, and they're flaunting all of these, you know, we need to bring peace, we need to talk about this, while their companies, their corporations, their international entities are literally looting the continent, and they'll continue talking about this de facto peace, which will come on a different date. Meanwhile, folks are continually mining. Once there is no mine, then there will be peace, except the regional blocs basically stepped up and say, we're going to put an end to every mining operation that is taking place in this part of the world, and we're going to basically state that if you're going to be a mining company that is mining in this part of the world, you must be registered, doing the right things, and you must be also taxed fairly, and you will pay fair value for what you're mining. Then I guarantee you that we'll have no conflict in this part of the world.
Exactly, that was happening in Mali as we speak. Now, you already highlighted a lot of key points, which I would not like to come back on, but then we are developing this latest development of what's happening, or latest unfoldment of what's happening in DRC. Now, how might a successful peaceful agreement by your approach, reshape the security dynamics of the entire region, which happens to be the Great Lakes region?
Well, there's only one country, and I think is the DRC. The DRC is the focal point of whatever geopolitical issues we have that is surrounding the area. It has real nothing to do with, maybe Al-Shabaab in the eastern part of the continent, and or some terrorist groups that might be operating in that part of the world. The real pain that we have in that central region is actually the DRC, and it is the same sickness that is happening with the Central African Republic. So while we're talking about the DRC, let us not forget that the Central African Republic is going through the same issues. So because it's heavy in terms of minerals, and you have all these, crazy lunatics that are showing up from everywhere around the world to come and mine, and they bring in real instability, conflicts, and people are dying on a daily basis. So yes, my take, I think that if the regions, if these regional blocs, especially East African community, is real interested in bringing peace into the region, I think that they will do whatever it takes to make sure that they laser focus on the issues of the DRC. The DRC needs to heal. A healthy DRC basically means that the continent of Africa has basically matured and has grown up. If a country like Nigeria, if a country like South Africa, if these two countries actually decides that there's going to be legitimate peace, I'm talking about with military might, in this part of the world, and to basically force all militia groups in the DRC to basically hang up their weapons and suspend all fighting, to close every single mining operation that is taking place in the DRC. I'm talking about mining operations that are controlled by Israel's, entities. They are one of the richest folks on the African continent. Is actually a Jewish guy who is owning a lot of mines in the DRC. This guy is responsible for most of the philanthropic work that is taking place in Israel at the expense or at the backs of Africans. We just have to say it the way it is. Likewise, Apple, likewise Samsung, likewise Tesla, all of these foreign entities, but yet the African is dying. And what is shameful is that you have a group like the AU who sits on the, not so high horses, little tiny midget horses, in Addis Ababa, and they are flaunting might, and they think that they're having conversations that are meaningful, not knowing that they are being played like pawns in the hands of Western imperialistic powers. We need a real, legitimate, a power structure on the continent of Africa that will speak for the African, that will be for the African, that will be for the salvation and the liberation of the African, not these power structures, that are nothing else but pawns in the hands of the West and in the hands of the East.
So I remember a statement that was made by Pierre Lumumba that stated Africa needs stronger leaders, or powerful leaders, and not just institutions that are just there, without any significance on the African continent. And now, some time ago, a South African Minister of Mines stated that it's imperative for Africa to be able to, protect its mineral resources, its natural resources, at the expense of the development of its nations, at the expense of the people, the population that are supposed to benefit. It's always important for the country to safeguard this away from people that want to just come and get it for their own benefits. But away from all this, Looking at the way forward for the Democratic Republic of Congo, what are some of the suggestions that you could bring forth, as an expert to the table, in a bid to resolve this crisis that has been raging on for so long, especially as that is plaguing the Democratic Republic of Congo? And do you believe that changing these things, changing dynamics on the African continent will begin with a change of mindset, reawakening within the African continent is going to bring about some change or true liberation, as regards what's a plague in Africa?
I am in love with the mining minister for South Africa, and the reason for that is because it is absolutely important that if we're going to talk about real legitimate change on the African continent, we need to be able to protect our mining sector. We need to protect our mines. So if that means that we need to suspend all the fake license officially in places like the DRC, where all these corporations have been mining for at least a year, and get the economic hit that we are going to get, because we suspend this mining, that will be good in the long run. And the reason for that is because once you have done that, then you can now be able to reassess what you really have, and then have channels on the ground that will be responsible for marketing what you have at fair market value. The reality is this: the people on the ground who are supposed to be benefiting from these natural resources are the poorest on planet Earth. The DRC is the richest in the world, one of the richest countries in the world, but it has one of the most poorest peoples, around the world. That is an eyesore. And the reason for that is because obviously the people who are mining are neither Congolese. The people who are basically benefiting from this are those who are up the supply chain. Once little babies in Congo are thrown into the mines to go through the cracks and crevices, to pull out the so much precious mineral that the world needs, the only person who is not benefiting, who is actually dying as a result of this expedition, are the Congolese children who are thrown into these mines like pigs and dogs, while folks sit in places like California, New York, Russia, Beijing, and enjoy what is it that has been mined by little babies on the African continent. That in itself is sickening. So when we get to sit and talk about democracy, when we talk about the rule of law, when we talk about people who sit on the sidelines of civilizations and basically just tell each and every one of us on the continent of Africa, the way we should live, and to bring all of these so-called crazy ideas from the West, like how the former presidential candidate for the United States, what Kamala Harris, showed up in Ghana or in Uganda and tried as much as she could to be able to state that the only way in which real progress and meaningful progress on the continent of Africa can come will be as a result of a transgender agenda. When people are dying in collapsed mines in Cameroon, collapsed mines in the DRC, collapsed mines all across Africa, just so that people can be able to lay their hands on these precious minerals, that is an insult. When you have a president like Barack Hussein Obama who shows up in Kenya, and the only thing that comes out of his mouth, in terms of any real articulated, expectation for the people, was to state that there needs to be freedom so far as the transgender movement is concerned. He is an insult, to the African, and I think that every African should be ashamed that he's connected in one form or other to the African continent. That is quite disgraceful, to say the least. The reality is this: that if we stop the mines, the intrinsic value of gold is not going to disappear no matter what. The best way to save or to store any mineral is to allow it in its original state. Stop mining. If we stop mining, then we can be able to fix all other issues, and then to make sure that we own our supply chain so far as the mining expeditions are concerned. We own the license. We basically give the licenses to the people who are supposed to have the license. We sanitize these mining areas of every corrupt, companies that have come from outside. We put an end to the infighting that is taking place, and then allow Africans to be responsible for the minerals on the African continent. continent. We own that. It's ours. We have the right to be able to decide exactly who we sell to and what we do with what we have. That is the right. That is part of our human right as Africans. And to have the United Nations, which is basically as sick as the EU, to sit on the sidelines and try as much as they could to meddle on anything that is happening on the African continent, it's a disgrace. We don't need the milk. We don't need the cheese. We don't need the bread. We need gold. We have our gold. Leave us the hell alone and let us basically decide who we're going to sell to, when we are going to mine. I think when we mine has to be on the interest of the African. How we mine has to be on the interest of the African. To whom it is that we trade with also has to be on the issues of the African. Without which, I don't think that the world has anything to offer so far as the African continent is concerned, if not that we have been exploited as we did in the past. I think that when we talk about the neo-colonial era, there is no other area on the African continent that is as totally invaded by these neo-colonial tendencies like the mining sector. And that is quite troubling. This is slavery 2.0. This is the colonial era 3.0. We must do whatever it takes to make sure that we put an end to this madness.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stanley FONGOD, for your insight as far as, to this topic of discussion is concerned. While we await the recommendations, the outcomes of the peace talks that are expected to take place in Luanda, Angola, March 18th, 2025, we equally have anticipations of, have the ability to propose alternate solutions to ending this crisis that have been plaguing for so long the Democratic Republic of Congo, especially in its eastern region. Now, from your perspective, could you chart a way forward, not just related to the Democratic Republic of Congo as far as restoring peace is concerned, but to every other country that is in turmoil at this point in time on the African continent?
I think that reinvestments must be made outside of the mining sectors in places like the DRC, in places like in the eastern part of Cameroon, in places like Ghana, in places like, the belts, Sahara belts in Nigeria. There has to be a lot of progress that is made in diversification so far as, the economy is concerned in those parts of the world. And the reason for that is because if you will have to suspend mining expeditions in this part of the world, you must be able to give people other alternatives. By the way, most of the mining that is taking place in this part of the world is artisan mining. It's mining, it's not real industrial mining. It's not anything done at the industrial scale. It's all artisan mining. I've been involved in artisan mining myself, and I know just exactly how difficult it can be. So what we need to do is to get into some form of industrial mining, and let it be that most of this industrial mining gets into corporations that are state-owned. If not, partly owned by the state, so that we fully control what is leaving the continent. We cannot rely on private citizens to tell us exactly whether they shipped a kilo of gold, whether they shipped 100. That is not happening. Secondly, we need to now take the monies from those areas and then reinvest in other sectors of the economy. We must understand that there has to be a day will come when none of the minerals that is being sought after will be needed anymore. Number one, or it will run out. And if that was going to be the case, we will still need the land for agricultural purposes. We must be able to make sure that once we've done with the mine and we are now we've come to the conclusion that there is nothing left, there has to be a process of reclaiming the land so that it can be good for agriculture. So aggressive form of mining that will use mercury and all other toxic materials just so that we can be able to purify gold or any other minerals, especially when it comes to the mining of lithium, which can be very toxic to the environment. We must make sure that those things are heavily controlled so far as the continent is concerned, because sooner or later, long after the minings are over, a couple of years from now, maybe 100 years from now, we will have to go back to farming. We will have to be able to use those areas, for agricultural purposes, or there will have to be new constructions as the population grow. There have to be, buildings in this area and there has to be a way in which we protect the environment to make sure that the environment is healthy. That is the way going forward. And I think that on the broad perspective, we just need to be able to regulate the mining sector, invest money in different sectors of the economy, so that those sectors, we can push people out of these mining areas into those sectors so that they can also begin to flourish. After all, artisan miners are not really experts in anything, but you can retrain, re-educate, and then send these folks, these kids who are mining, you know, in this child miners, you know, we can re-educate and then send them into different aspects of the society. Those are our doctors, those are our lawyers, those are our engineers. That's what we need to do so far, you know, going forward is concerned.
Indeed, and we have nations like Mali that are trying as much as possible, the governments in that part of the African continent, trying as much as possible to curb, limit the donation of permits to those that are, you know, qualified in a bid to curb the artisanal mining that's taking place on the African continent. Thank you immensely, Dr. Stanley FONGOD, for your insight on today's edition of Talking Point.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you on board, share your brilliant insight with our fervent audience. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Stanley FONGOD in this capacity as a Pan-Africanist and as an economist. We've come to the end of today's edition of Talking Point over your Pan-African channel for you, Media Africa. Today, we were discussing the upcoming talks, peace talks to take place between the Kinshasa government and the M23 rebels come March 18, 2025. And of course, we believe you learned a lot from today's conversation. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, do have a great day in company of our numerous programs.